Good afternoon and welcome to our TV show featuring documentaries revealing the realities behind myths using research and scholarship. I'm your host, Ergun Kırlıkovalı, and I will be with you every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're welcome to send me your feedback at mythsandrealities.com. First, a little background. In episode 43, we have learned that Professor Justin McCarthy had discovered in the US National Archives in 1990 a survey of Eastern Anatolia conducted in the summer of 1919 by two Americans, Captain Emory H. Niles and Mr. Arthur E. Sutherland Jr. Their account is one of the first descriptions of this region by outside observers after World War I. The document was missing, however, the author's field notes, which the authors specifically stated should be read in conjunction with their report. Some 20 years after that momentous discovery, Niles and Sutherland's field notes have been found in 2010 in the missionary archives of the former American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions, or ABCFM for short. Some call it the Board, in Istanbul, by another American historian, Brian Johnson. In episodes 44 and 45, I covered Johnson's research work titled Americans Investigating Anatolia, the 1919 field notes of Emory Niles and Arthur Sutherland. Published in the peer-reviewed periodical called the Journal of Turkish Studies, 34 to 2010, 129 to 147. A PDF version of this report is available on the internet. In the summer of 1919, between July 14th and August 12th, Emory Niles and Arthur Sutherland, employees of the aid organization called the American Committee for Relief in the Near East, or the Near East Relief for short, traveled from Mardin to Trabzon by way of Bitlis, Van, and Erzurum, visiting 23 cities in 4 weeks, to determine their relief needs of the local and how the Near East Relief could fulfill them. Their report was somehow mixed in among various papers related to the Major General James Harbord Commission, a survey expedition sent by President Wilson to Anatolia and the South Caucasus in September 1919 to investigate the feasibility for an American mandate over the region and the establishment of an Armenian state that would include most of eastern Turkey. Harbord and some U.S. military officers traveled from Mardin to Tiflis, but took a different route than Miles and Sutherland. Harbord relied in his report on Niles and Sutherland's observations of Bitlis and Van, where the Armenian cruelty victimizing Muslims was at its peak, and where it was not accessible to the Harbord mission, as Harbord put it. That would be fine if Harbord did not distort Niles and Sutherland's findings by implying that they were similar to Harbord's findings. They were not. They were diametric opposites. At the end of the World War I, when the victorious Allies gathered around the table at the Paris Peace Conference to negotiate the partition and sharing of the global war loot, they pledged to resolve all issues at, quote, open covenants openly arrived at, unquote. However, secret agreements behind closed doors were more norm than exception. Margaret Macmillan captured this climate well in the introduction of her book called Paris, 1919, 6 months that changed the world. Page 19, I quote, "For 6 months in 1919, Paris was the capital of the world. The peace conference was the world's most important business, the peacemakers its most powerful people. They met day after day. They argued, debated, quarreled, and made it up again. They created new countries and new organizations. They dined together and went to the theater together. And between January and June, Paris was at once the world's government, its court of appeal, and its parliament. The focus of its fears and hopes. Officially, the peace conference lasted into 1920, but those first 6 months in 1919 are the most important ones that count, when the key decisions were taken and the crucial chains of events set in motion. The world has never seen anything quite like it and will never again," unquote. During this time, the Allied wanted President Wilson to determine the borders of Armenia and preferably assume a mandate over it. Under such circumstances, 2 American investigation commissions were sent out to examine conditions in the Near East. The first one was King Crane Commission, dispatched to Arab lands, which I covered in episode 47. To refresh your mind, King Crane Commission visited 36 cities, mostly in the Arab provinces of the Ottoman Empire, in the 6-week period between June 10th and July 21st, 1919. Bias and defamation, ubiquitous in the US Protestant Missionary reports and by extension in the US and European media coverage based on them, have dominated, unfortunately, the King Crane report also. One might say prejudice and perception trumped objectivity and facts. The US government withheld the report because the suggestion of independence for Arab states in it would inevitably clash with the imperialist demands of Britain and France. Thus, King Crane report had little effect on American public or the international arena, although the US government discussed it at length within itself. The second investigation commission was General Herbert Mission, sent to Eastern Anatolia and the Caucasus, which I covered in episode 48. General Herbert was charged with studying the situation of Armenians. Please note, not all the peoples of Eastern Anatolia and the Caucasus, but just Armenia. Such was the bias. The mission members were mainly American military men. One Armenian, Lieutenant Kachaznuni, and one Turk, Professor Hussein, later known Pektash, were official members. Another Armenian, Major Shekerjian, joined the mission in Anatolia as a de facto member. Kachaznuni, a naturalized American citizen who had previously worked with an American aid mission to Armenian Republic, drew many of the mission reports and filled them with disparaging comments on the character of the Turks, but few data. Kachaznuni was also a member, often the leader, of fact-finding missions that were sent to regions not visited by the entire mission. Hussein, the sole Turk, was not representative of the Turkish public opinion and certainly not a Turkish nationalist. The founding member of the Turkish Wilsonian League, he publicly supported an American mandate for Anatolia. Archival records make no mention of his role in the mission's deliberations. Most significantly, the only interpreters to occupy the mission were Armenians. Kojasar, Hovhannes, Syrigian, only a few Turks in Istanbul who knew foreign languages spoke for themselves. All other comments of Turks who were questioned in Eastern Anatolia, the scene of the Turkish-Armenian troubles, were filtered through Armenian translators. Source for this? Justin McCarthy, The Turk in America, The Creation of an Enduring Prejudice, published by the University of Utah Press, Salt Lake City, 2010, page 277. Before they left for their investigations, Harbor Mission members were given a list of persons to consult in Paris and on-site in Istanbul, Anatolia, and Trans-Caucasia, who would allegedly give reliable information. The list included Bogos Nubar, head of an Armenian national delegation at Paris Peace Conference, Avetis Aharonian, president of the Armenian Republic, Hovhannes Kachaznuni, Prime Minister of Armenian Republic, Charles Crane, James Barton, Herbert Gibbons, and the Armenian Patriarch and other Armenians in Istanbul. The anti-Turkish and anti-Muslim opinions that might be expressed and the advice given to the commission members by Armenian churchmen, generals, and politicians should be obvious to any fair-minded person. All the other suggested sources of information were tied to the missionary establishment, and the commission was given a complete list of American missionaries in the territories to be visited. Only one Turk, the Prime Minister of Azerbaijan, was mentioned as a possible source of information, but no Ottoman Turks or other Muslims were included in the list of persons to be consulted. None. It is clear by the introductory body of reading given to the members, the list of interviews in Paris, Istanbul, Anatolia, and the Caucasus, and finally the makeup of the commission itself, that the Harvard mission was not playing with the full deck. Harvard mission went with a perception in mind and looked for evidence to support such perception. Facts that did not fit that perception, like the realities observed by Niles and Sutherland, were dismissed, ignored, or even misrepresented. The position papers on the Turkish-Armenian conflict that were given the Harvard mission, for example, mentioning population statistics, crucial in studying the feasibility and the moral justification of creating an Armenia in Anatolia, were completely drawn by Armenians. Source: US National Archives, 184.021/206. Historical essays ignored cruel actions by Armenians and neglected to mention that many Turks had died at the hands of Armenians. Many violent and massive Armenian rebellions against the Ottoman government were omitted. Turks, when mentioned at all, were always portrayed in the worst possible light, with little information about the lives or history of Turks or other Muslims. An unsuspecting reader might be led to believe that the Armenians had been an overwhelming majority in the East rather than what they really were, a distinct minority. Most of the material given to the mission was only on Armenians or by Armenians. Even those few sections specifically devoted to Turks were rebutted by Armenian insurgents. For example, the section titled Turks in the Caucasus contains 7 pages of letters, all written by that notorious Armenian rebel, Andranik, who murdered in cold blood many Turks himself. Throughout the position papers, the primary input was from missionaries and Armenians. When mission members talked to Turks at all, it was about political matters. And the Turks they spoke to were usually, but not always, opponents of the old Ottoman system who hoped to gain politically or who felt that capitulation was necessary for survival. Herbert mission did not talk to Turks who had suffered at the hands of Armenians. How could they have done so with only Armenian interpreters in the team? Isn't it a bit like a key KKK leader being asked to translate the suffering of African Americans? Or a Nazi officer being asked to translate Jewish suffering? The Herbert mission arrived in Istanbul at the beginning of September 1919. The 50-member mission traveled for 30 days from Adana to Tiflis, visiting some 15 cities, including Erzincan, Erzurum, Kars, Etchmiadzin, and Yerevan. A side expedition split at Sivas to investigate conditions at Merzifon, Samsun, and Trabzon. The Herbert Commission report indicated that the Turkish population was far more numerous than the Armenians even before the war. In some Muslim villages, no stone was left unturned, while the Armenian districts remained untouched. Herbert could see these for himself. He traveled onward from Erzurum to Kars and all the way up to Yerevan, the path followed by the Russian troops with its scorched earth policy, totally devastating Muslim villages along the way. The Herbert mission failed to visit the worst areas of wartime suffering in Eastern Anatolia. Realizing this deficiency, he tried to circumvent with this deceptive statement. I quote, "All of the provinces of the Turkish Armenia were visited except Van and Bitlis, which were inaccessible in the time available, but which have been covered by Captain Niles, an army officer who inspected them on horseback in August, and whose report corroborates our observations in the neighboring regions." Unquote. Source, US National Archives, 184,02102/5, page 2. It's a well-known fact by now that Herbert and Niles' reports are far from corroborating each other. They are diametrically opposed to each other in their findings. Likewise, Herbert claimed that official reports of the Turkish government said 1.1 million Armenians had been deported and that 1.5 million Armenians had been killed. Both statements were fabrications. Not only do they contradict all other reports of the Ottoman and Turkish governments, but also they are statistical nonsense. Herbert bent the truth as well regarding the Turkish nationalists asserting that they wanted an American mandate over the Ottoman Empire, whereas Mustafa Kemal, the leader of the Turkish nationalists, had taken care not to accept a US mandate. When he spoke with Herbert, Mustafa Kemal asked for American adherence to Wilson's 14 principles and added that he would not say no to humanitarian aid. Herbert's report stated that the temptation for reprisals would make it extremely difficult to maintain peace in the region, so a mandate for Armenia alone was not deemed feasible. It suggested that Armenia be included in the wider American mandate for Asia Minor and Rumelia. Having been exposed only to the pro-Armenian propaganda, Herbert was pro-Armenian, no doubt about that. However, the fair side of him saw for the first time that there was much more to the one-sided story he had been fed all along. All things considered, the Herbert mission was less a fact-finding mission and more a mission to justify the anti-Turkish and anti-Islam prejudices and perceptions dominating America and Europe. It is difficult to imagine a less productive approach than the Harvard mission to discovering the truth. At this point, I would like to share with you a very interesting Turkish book regarding the memoirs of Mustafa Kemal's confidant, Kılıç Ali Pasha. It has been published by İş Bankası in Istanbul in 2005, and many editions were published since. Here's an informal translation of pages 69 to 77 from the third edition, where Kılıç Ali Pasha describes in detail the climate of Harvard Mustafa Kemal meeting in Sivas on September 22nd and 23rd, 1919. Quote, "We were all anxiously waiting and yet apprehensive that General Harvard may change his mind and not stop by in Sivas and on his path to a country called Armenia that England, America, and France wanted to establish on our land. America had joined the allies, England, France, and Russia, and Italy, that we had fought against from 1914 to 1918. Our opponents had won the war against our allies, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Bulgaria, with backing from America's unbeatably strong war machine. The American Senate had approved the foundation of a new country named Armenia, occupying 7 Turkish provinces. General Harvard was assigned the duty to investigate this area designated for the new Armenian state and report his findings to the Senate. It was a real dangerous time because the armed forces of Armenia, founded within Russia, had badgered Turkey's eastern borders. The Turkish nationalists living in Istanbul contacted the general through the friendly director of Robert College and tried to strike a lightning in his mind, which might have been filled with false Armenian myths. They also alerted Mustafa Kemal, who was in Sivas. We prepared a military welcoming ceremony for the guest. A boy and a girl handed over a bouquet of flowers. The meetings between Mustafa Kemal and General Harvard took 2 days. It was decided that the large group of Americans would travel to Erzurum. The Armenians had run havoc in that city. Kazım Karabekir assigned Hüsrev Gerede and myself to the duty to accompany our American guests to Erzurum. Mustafa Kemal ordered us to make sure to show General Harvard every massacre of Muslims that took place in that geography. We were pleased that the large American group was moving slowly so that we could show them the surroundings and the Muslim villages ravaged by the Armenians. The Armenians had killed some of their own kind even when they came in disagreement. Armenians were testifying to the massacres they faced in the hands of Armenians, revolutionaries. Pastırmacıyan, who was representing Erzurum at the Ottoman Parliament, headed the Armenian gangs who marauded Erzurum with the advent of the Russian army. He took refuge in Russia when the Russian army retreated. Later, he took the name Armen Garo, meaning Armenian hero. He resorted to all kinds of atrocities among the Muslims of Erzurum with the Hunchak and Dashnak soldiers of Russian origin, troops that he led. Antranik arrived in Erzurum after Karakin Pastırmacıyan left. His atrocities were so fierce that the Russian general Ruchevsky had to banish him out of Erzurum. It was embarrassing. The local Armenians who did not join Antranik and were tortured by Armenian revolutionaries had escaped to the mountains. They came out only after the Turkish army had arrived. Karabekir faced the American general with these sad realities. Our mosques, schools, and even our graveyards had been ransacked by Armenian traitors. The Armenian churches, schools, and graveyards, however, remained intact. Herbert bid farewell in the same dignified manner as he was greeted by the Turks, who had nothing to hide. While shaking Karabaker's hand, Herbert said, I quote, "I saw the truth on location," unquote. This completes the two-part series on Herbert mission. I will focus on documenting the massive Armenian confessions of criminality, atrocities, rebellions, treason, and more in four-part series next. Thank you for joining me, and see you next week.